So with that, I cannot wait for this week's shout outs and rants. We'll keep the same order and I will bat fifth. So Matt Kelly, what you got for us this week?
Today, I'm going to start with some praise and then probably wander off into a rant by the time I'm done. But I am here to praise the Supreme Court, which is not something I really have done lately in the last couple of years with this court, for their ruling earlier this week upholding the funding structure of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau on a 7-2 vote, rather decisive, that yes, the CFPB can get its budget as a percentage of the Federal Reserve's budget rather than an annual appropriation. Congress, that is not news. There are multiple agencies out there that get their funding in this same way. It always seemed to me to be a bit of a no-brainer that the CFPB can operate this way, and this case should never have reached here. Oddly enough, of course, it only reached this point because a bunch of right-wing people who don't like the regulations of the CFPB, this is the part where I veer into a rant, that they pushed this case, and it went nowhere in the district court, so they appealed to the Fifth Circuit Court, and they wound up with a bunch of Trump appointee judges who evaluate this. So you all know where that's going to go when you get Trump judges involved, is that the Trump judges said, of course this is unconstitutional, and therefore maybe the entire corpus of work for the last 13 years of the CFPB should go down the toilet, which would have been a complete bureaucratic and legal quagmire and a mess if that had happened. And the Supreme Court wisely said, this is also ridiculous. Of course, it is actually constitutional, and we do not need to invalidate 13 years worth of the CFPB's work. Really, what gets to me is that these right-wing groups don't like what the law allows a regulatory body to do, so then they try and attack the regulatory body from other directions under these flim-flam reasons about, is this constitutional funding or something like that? Like, give me a break. If you don't like what the CFPB is doing, then assemble a working majority in Congress to pass a law that changes what it does, which the right-wing people opposing the CFPB never did because they can't, and they all know it. Most people in this country like the idea that there are some curbs on predatory financial practices, and I get that compliance with the CFPB's rules can be a pain in the neck, but hey, that's the job. This is what we elected Congress to do. This is the law that they passed in 2010, and therefore it all flows from that. I suppose that what my real rant here is these continuing attacks on the government's ability to solve problems. And that seems to be the beef that these critics have. And enough. If you don't want the government to solve problems, put a bunch of people into Congress who then defang the federal government. That's fine. You can do that. This is a democracy. That's not what they do. They wind up trying to use Trump judges to see if they can dismantle everything and leave everybody else vulnerable. And like, enough. And when even this Supreme Court says enough, of course, the CFPB can stay. That's really just says a lot about how weak this case is and the general lack of interest that this group has in solving the country's problems. That's all. I'm going to get off my soapbox.
All right. We have a very high bar set. Karen Moore, what do you got?
I've got flood sympathies going out first to Texas, where Texas is so big, but I heard flood and I immediately wanted to make sure Tom and his family were okay, and they are. But I want to talk about the flooding in Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil, where there are 500,000 people displaced, several hundred people dead, and untold numbers of people missing. And my shout out is going to go out to two rowers, Evaldo Mathias Becker and Piedro Tuchtenhagen, who have decided to drop out of the qualifying phase of their Olympic pitch in order to stay back and help out with flood victims and trying to find some of the missing people. I think the whole thing is made more poignant or maybe praiseworthy by the fact that in their category, the lightweight rowing category, this is their last chance at the Olympics. That category has been excluded as of the 2028 Olympics. So 2024 Paris was their last shot of bringing home a medal or just competing. So for people who have put Olympic preparation front and center for a long time and rowing at that level, to say, no, my country's more important, my country needs me, I really shout out to them and so many of the other, real heroes, noted and unnoted, who are stepping in difficult circumstances.
Jonathan Marks.
My shout out is to Dylan Beard on the Olympic team, who is a Walmart deli counter employee who is going to be headed to the 2024 Summer Olympics. And Beard emerged as a surprise winner in the 60-meter hurdles at the Millrose Games in February. And it's really a great story. And I encourage you all out there to go read about it. And even more so, when people found out about this gentleman and his level of work ethic and the like. And that's one of the reasons why it really hit me pretty hard. And I think he deserves a shout out. And this guy's working in Walmart's Spice and Meat. And he also went and earned his master's degree in public health at Howard University. He's training for the Olympics. And so it's really an interesting story. But Beard was actually blown away when the Today Show's Craig Melvin presented him with a check from Walmart for $20,000 so his friends and family could support him as he makes his way to the Olympic trials. And I just think that's just awesome. And to everyone involved in that and for recognizing this man's zest for competing and especially working hard and his level of ethic, I just think it's remarkable. So a big, huge shout out to Dylan.
Mike DeBernardis. High bar, buddy.
I know. I'm gonna go with a quick shout out to my Washington Commanders, who have, for the entirety of my adult life, caused me nothing but anguish and pain and suffering. And I am absolutely getting ahead of myself, but am just after what looked like a strong and competent draft process, seem to be running a professional organization again. So I think, talk about tone at the top. We could have many conversations about how the tone at the top of that organization has been affected, but I am optimistic for the first time in a long time. So shout out to the Commanders.
There's been so much this week that I could talk about. I could talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene complaining about the false eyelashes of another House member. I could read about Greg Abbott, who pardoned a convicted murderer who, with malice aforethought and announcing on social media he was going to kill a Black Lives Matter protester, drove directly into a crowd, stepped out of his car and shot one. I could rant about Justice Samuel Alito, who flew a Stop the Steal flag on January 6th from his house. But I'm going to shout out and rant to the city of Louisville because two things happened. The first was they released the video of the cab video of the driver who drove off the bridge over the Missouri River and hung there for an hour while she was rescued. It turned out a car had veered into her lane, dodging another car who had stopped on the bridge. And the driver, one Sydney Thomas, avoided hitting any other cars while driving her 18-wheeler and crashing through the rail. So shout out to Sydney Thomas. But Louisville being Louisville, you got to bookend it with a rant. So today, at the start of the PGA, police officer Brian Gillis arrests the #1 golfer in the world, Scott Scheffler, for some sort of driving violation. And I have to read what he was charged with, quote, damaged Detective Gillis uniform pants valued at approximately $80 beyond repair. City of Louisville welcoming the world's golfers to the PGA. What do? Let's arrest the #1 golfer in the world. Now, to Mr. Scheffler's credit, he is under par for his first round. What a great episode, guys. I can't thank you enough. Special shout out and thanks to Karen Moore and Mike DeBernardis for joining us. And I can't wait to see what we come up with next time, guys.